Let's talk about agent-based backup versus agentless. I think in a perfect world, a lot of customers have just gotten used to agentless with VMware, but that doesn't exist in other hypervisors all the time. So what advice do you have for end users to think about potentially saying, you know what, I know you're kind of used to agent-based with VMware, but to change hypervisors, you might need to go agent-based. So what are the pros and cons here, or talk to the audience about how agent-based backup could work for them?
Yeah, so the first, which is a non-technical, is the Veeam universal licensing. Is that, let's say you've been looking after 1,000 VMs on, say, a VMware stack. That same 1,000 license that you have of Veeam will follow you anywhere, like whether it's cloud-based workloads or agent-based workloads. So that's the first, like, you don't have to go and buy another product when it comes to Veeam, right? That's the first and foremost,
That's
which
good.
opens the door to that flexibility story about being able to really protect any workload anywhere. So in StorMagic's eyes, like, we've got the ability to protect those mission critical workloads that live on your hypervisor. I think as we get into the technical, the majority of these important systems are going to be running some sort of important database that ultimately, like a SQL database, a NoSQL database, a MongoDB, for example, they're going to need some sort of consistency. And that runtime means that we've got to make sure that we're talking to the database. You don't want to just be pulling out the power cable. So that agent approach, or agentless, is the ability to take a consistent copy of that data and make sure that we can recover that when bad things happen, but equally be granular about what that needs to look like as well. So one of the big ethos of Veeam is the portability story. How can we take any image-based backups and be able to restore that into any location? So so from an agent perspective, if we're taking an agent backup of a Windows server running Microsoft SQL, not only do we have the granularity of being able to say SQL, we're going to take a backup now, and let's pause that IO and take that consistent copy. That gets stored into something called a VBK format, and that VBK format gives us the ability to restore that either back to an agent or elsewhere. And I think that's where the flexibility comes in, not only the license, but also the ability to protect that. We also have the explorers that allow us to dive into those applications. So MongoDB, for example, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server. We've got the ability to take those backups in a consistent fashion, but now we can dive into that database and pull out individual items. And we've got that same capability across whether it's a virtual machine through native integrations with the hypervisor or through an agent base. So really, like, I don't see a difference when it comes to agent versus agentless. It just means that we've got an agent on that machine, which means we could probably do more with that data.
Right. What about from a from a backup data protection admin perspective? If they're used to using Veeam, the user interface they have, do they have to learn anything new, or is the agent base it's the setup part that's different, but the administration is the same? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So a big ethos. One is the flexibility of being able to use that license wherever it needs to be. So during these hypervisor Hunger Games, making sure that you choose the right, uh, I think the right district to back, but also from an agent point of view, the same UI, the same easy look and feel, wizard driven approach to be able to protect those agents is exactly the same as from a hypervisor perspective.
Yeah. That's what I thought, and I just wonder if it's just I'm trying to think of the analogy here, but like it's just you get used to what you're used to, right? IT departments have gotten used to the simple integration with VMware. They don't have to think about agents, and now you say, well, if you want to change hypervisors, you might have to do something different. So maybe it's just comfort or education or something like that that the IT admins have to get a little bit. They have to think outside the box a little bit, but they get the same benefits. It sounds like.
Yeah. So the one thing I'd add as well within the Veeam console, from a Veeam data platform perspective, is we'll look after all the deployment and the management and the updates of those agents as they get deployed. So we could use Active Directory to deploy out to the machines that you want to be protected. So that could be a mixture of a bit of physical as well as hypervisor backed virtual machines with our agents, and we use policies to be able to deploy the agent out into those machines, those systems.
Right.
Equally, though, you could do it on a one-to-one basis. That gets a bit hectic if you're doing more than, say, 10 machines. So we want to give you the ability to automate that through Active Directory or through like CSV of those machines. But ultimately, we're going to look after one of the biggest things, right? And Veeam came out of this. This is how Veeam started, right? Protected vSphere workloads in an agentless fashion, whilst our competition were putting agents on the VMs. Veeam
Right.
comes along, starts hooking into the vSphere APIs and be able to say, like, we're just going to take the backup from there, help working on change bot tracking, etc. Um, and then everyone followed suit. The ease, though, the in fact the overhead of agents back then was the central manager. You had an agent for Exchange, you had an agent for SQL, you had an agent for Windows, you had an agent for Linux. You just had multiple agents for a lot of different things. Our agents are Windows, Linux, and within those agents, they enable us to protect the application that's inside of that machine. It's not like we have back
Right.
then there was 40 plus agents to deal with and maintain.
Actually, I do remember those days. Yeah, I was at Dell back then. I remember all that. Yeah, so you've made it super easy for agents to be deployed and managed, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah,
Speak,
exactly.
speaking of which, I had another question on this topic is what have you done to make, all right, so installing an agent on every VM can sound like an arduous task, but what have you done to make it easy and or what about patching and keeping them updated? Is that hard to do using Veeam's tools?
Yeah, so again, in the same fashion, because we've deployed that agent from a centralized location, we'll also look after the updates to all of those agents that we're deploying.